Paula P. works here. I think Absalom, former member of the Mysterious Four, was the son of one Golden Lion Shiki, former member of the Rocks Pirates. Let's get into it. Slight one-off spoilers ahead. So I am surprised to find out that upon his death, Absalom was only 36 years old. This means that he's young enough to be the son of Shiki, whom, after his escape of Impel Down and the sort of end of chapter 0 before the 20-year time skip for him begins, he was a full-grown adult, probably in his 40s or 50s, which means by the time we see him in the story again, will be in his 60s or 70s, making him old enough to have a son that is only 36. So, with that being said, let's move on to physical characteristics. In terms of physical characteristics, both Absalom and Shiki are both tan-skinned men with long blonde flowing hair. What's also very interesting is that both Shiki and Absalom are shown to have thick lips. We see Absalom's lips when he is a child. Now, what's also very interesting about these two characters is that both of them have undergone various body modifications that make them look like animals. The difference is that Shiki's modifications are born out of circumstance, whereas Absalom's modifications are born out of strength and vanity. So, with Shiki, in his final fight with Roger, he got a steering wheel piece lost in his head. This resembles the crest of a rooster. Then, when Shiki escapes from Impel Down by chopping off his feet, he replaces those feet with his two swords. Now, within combination of having very skinny sword peg legs and a crest that is a steering wheel atop his head, he even more so looks like a rooster, made even funnier by the fact that his powers allow him to fly, making him a flying rooster. Now, with Absalom, of course, he got the whole muzzle section of his face removed and replaced with that of a lion, and then various animal skins and muscle fibers grafted onto his body for strength and durability. What's also interesting about this too is that both characters are associated with doctors. Hogback, of course, the greatest surgeon in the world, is associated with Absalom and performed the surgeries on him. And then we have Dr. Indigo, who's associated with Shiki. So let's talk about lion iconography between the two. So Shiki's nickname is the Golden Lion. His weird island ship that he's shown to have in Strong World also has a lion on it. And his various attacks in Strong World, his float attacks, take the shape of giant lion's heads made of various materials, right? One was snow, one was a mountain, etc., etc. Now, with Absalom, his lion modification, the muzzle and nose of a lion that he has, is his oldest modification because we've seen him younger than 34, which is how old he is at the start of the Thriller Bark arc, and he still has a lion's muzzle. So that's his oldest modification. Additionally, it's been highly suggested that his actual face was then grafted onto the corpse of a lion, and we see this lion zombie with a human face in Thriller Bark. Then we see when Absalom is depicted as a child, he is standing next to a sign with a lion drawn on it, and the words "Strong Lion" written on that sign. What's interesting about this, going back to Shiki, is that Shiki's actual debut in the One Piece franchise is in the movie Strong World. So Shiki, the Golden Lion, debuts physically in the flesh in a movie called Strong World, making him the Strong Lion in Strong World. Very interesting. While on the topic of Strong World, let's talk about the two arcs that these characters debut in, because I find it very interesting that the nature of the location that they reside in has so much in common with their abilities. So, with Absalom, of course, was a part of the Mysterious Four that took residence on the island ship known as Thriller Bark. Thriller Bark is set in the mysterious Florine Triangle, hidden by the Florine Triangle's mists. This is very interesting because it is essentially a ghost island. It's hidden from view thanks to the mysterious weather conditions of the Florine Triangle. This is much like Absalom himself, because when the arc starts, he uses his clear fruit abilities and sort of hides around and does very raunchy and suspect things to the females of the Straw Hat crew. What's also very interesting in Thriller Bark is that Nami is the focus. He kidnaps Nami and does a impromptu wedding because he's infatuated with her. There's also a very risky scene with him using his clear powers to assault her in the bath. This is similar to Strong World specifically, and Melville as it is depicted in Chapter 0, because Melville is a giant mountain in the Grand Line. It's very high up, which is representative of Shiki, as he is a man with the power to make things float due to his flow powers. In the movie, Melville is the floating archipelago that the movie takes place in. So again, it's gone from being a very tall mountain to an archipelago of islands affected by Shiki's abilities. What's also interesting about the movie is that, much like Thriller Bark, it involves Nami. Shiki and the boys do a very funny dance number as Nami is getting out of the pool, but Nami is a focal point because she is an excellent navigator and Shiki requires her services. So in both situations, you have Nami being the focal point and the island in question having some reflectivity of the person on it, because it's almost like Thriller Bark is more reflective of Absalom than it is of Moria. Also to point out, both Absalom and Shiki have been under someone else. Shiki has been the boss in a lot of situations, but as in the story, we know him as a member of the Rock's Pirates. So he was under Rox D. Zebek, much like how Absalom, for the entirety of his existence in the narrative, has been under Moria. Also, an important note to point out is that there is a connection between Absalom and the Rock's Pirates. Absalom calls Captain John by name when he's assembling the special zombies. He also remarks that Captain John, who was a former member of the Rock's Pirates, has a particular degree of ferociousness. So he knows the history of who Captain John actually is. This is also the place where Captain John's treasure map is located. So that's a very interesting connection that he and he alone points out who Captain John is when his zombie emerges. This is very much like how Moria was very much informed about ores. So I'm saying this to say perhaps the reason why Absalom knows Captain John and perhaps knew where to find his corpse because he knew Captain John from the past as he was an associate of his father, Shiki. What makes me more suspicious about Absalom knowing where to find Captain John is because after the events of Thriller Bark, Absalom took the role of reporter, going by the alias Absa, and reported his findings to Morgans to put in the paper. So he has an investigative spirit about him. So maybe he knew Captain John from his childhood, and then perhaps hearing that he died and knowing that the business that he is entering went out to go find Captain John's corpse. While we're on the topic, what's very interesting here is that we're talking about flight and invisibility. Flight and invisibility have been sort of a psychological test when you ask people which power would they want. And the more positive answer has always been flight, as flight doesn't have any direct sort of advantage for the person with it, as it's a very visible power and everyone can see a person who flies, right? Because they are in the sky, they're very vulnerable and visible. Whereas with invisibility is more so an ability for the person with it, as he can use it to his advantage to take advantage of other people. So it's a very selfish ability. And it's very interesting too that it's painted in this way in One Piece. Whenever invisibility comes up, it's always associated with a villain or it's associated with something lecherous. So say like Absalom, Shiryu, Queen, all these guys are villains. And in the case of Absalom and Sanji, they did plan to use the power of the clear fruit for lecherous purposes. And Absalom does do that several times in Thriller Bark. Sanji, once he gets the ability, actually gives it up because of the connotations attached to what makes him invisible. which actually speaks a lot about his character, but nevertheless, it's very interesting that invisibility is painted as a very villainous power in One Piece. On the flip, flight is always seen as something very precious in One Piece. It's even stated that there are 5 flying abilities by Pell back in Alabasta. There's a lot of controversy about that remark. I've made several videos about it because it technically now remains true if you look at it in a particular way, but I'll put the video that I mentioned it here. But yeah, Shiki, being a man who has the ability of flight, is a very visible figure from when he was active before he actually went away to start his 20-year plan, because he fights Roger. He was a member of the Rocks Pirates. He pulled up on Marineford to fight Garp and Sengoku, being angry that his greatest adversary was executed in such a weak sea as the East Blue. So yes, he's a very, very visible figure. And then he's also noted as one of the most prominent escapees of Impel Down. So yes, very visible, very direct. So yeah, it plays out much like how the arguments always go about flight versus invisibility. Additionally, on the topic of invisibility being used for a nefarious intent, that's probably how Moria and the boys got so many high-profile corpses, as Absalom does have the ability to turn objects as well as himself and other people invisible. So he could easily go in with either Moria or perhaps a group of zombies already made and just dig up all these high profile corpses and not even be seen, nor the corpses would be seen because he would just make them invisible. I never thought about that up until now, but that's a very interesting thought. Especially makes sense too that Absalom's nickname is Absalom of the Graveyard. So obviously, yeah, that actually adds up. He's a grave robber because he's of the graveyard. So that makes a lot of sense. I don't think that's ever stated, but when you put 2 and 2 together, it all adds up. Now, do I think this relationship will have any prominence when it comes to the narrative? Yes. As of 1082, we find out that all Yonko factions are indeed pining for the One Piece at this moment in time. So, in the race for the One Piece, it would be interesting if a 5th party drops in unannounced, this 5th party being Shiki enacting his plan in the manga, making his actual full debut in the manga to enact the plan that he set out to do in chapter 0. Maybe this will be a rerun of Strong World, not sure, or a canonical version of Strong World. I do talk about that in my Neomaz video. I'll put a link right here for that. But I think it'll be interesting too that while Shiki is on screen, he mentions that he actually has a vendetta with a particular man for killing someone close to him. And that's where we find out that he has a vendetta against Blackbeard for killing his son, Absalom. With that being said, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. If you feel so inclined, please join my Discord, The Digital Burrow. Link down below. We talk about a bunch of One Piece stuff and video games there, so if you are so inclined, join the community. And with that being said, that is all I have for you today. Thank you so much again for watching. If you like stuff like this, please feel free to check out my YouTube channel, PollyP Works. And if you like what you see, I would appreciate your subscription. Thank you so much. See you next time.